Hi, I'm Jimmy Alexander, and this is Out with Jimmy. Now, there are many different types of coming out stories. You have the funny ones and the heartwarming ones, and sadly, there's a lot of heartbreaking ones. But the one thing that they do have in common, that the moment in your life when you've decided to stand up and tell everyone and admit to yourself who you really are. And each week, we're going to hear one of those stories. Now, I thought in the first episode, we would hear my coming out story. Now, this is Stephanie Flax, who is helping me here with Out with Jimmy, and she's a very close friend, and she has known me so long that she knew me when I dated women.
This is true.
That's a very long time. Each week, we're going to have the coming out cocktail. And this week, it's my favorite, champagne. And since I did already break one of the champagne flutes I have, this is going to be for Miss Flax.
Oh, well, why, thank you.
Each week, I'm going to be asking people questions about what it was like for them coming out. And this week, Stephanie is going to ask me questions. So, to Stephanie, cheers.
Cheers. Well, Jimmy, it's interesting that you asked me to conduct this interview of you, because I have known you for a long time, and we've had many of these conversations over the years, but in retrospect, since you asked me to do this, I've thought about it, and we've kind of done it in pieces. I've known pieces of the story. So I think what's going to be interesting today is to kind of hear everything from your perspective in kind of a cohesive story. So I thought I'd just kind of go ahead and get started and just ask you, the first time you said out loud, I'm gay, or I'm bi in your case, and who was that to?
Well, we have to go back a certain amount, because with what happened to me, I didn't come out, I was outed. Like, outed so hard, someone put their foot on the back of my ass and knocked me right out of the closet is what happened with me. So, I am not a smart man. And for many years, I dated women. Now, in the gay community, the LGBTQ community, I should say, bis they kind of look at bi people like roll their eyes like, sure, that's not a thing. But what happened with me was I was dating this girl that we worked with.
Yes.
And that I worked with, which is always smart.
Who is also, I should say, aware that you and I are having this conversation. Yes.
And for the rest of this, I'll call her my girlfriend. And during this, which was tough, because of all the people I had dated until that point in my life, she's the one I felt most connected with. Mm-hmm. She was funny. Mm-hmm. She was strong. She was smart. She introduced me to fine wine and beer. And she's truly a funny person. Now, she's from Texas, and she's tough. Oh, she's tough. And I really loved her dearly. It was the first time in my adult life I had a Christmas tree, and it was because of her. We went with friends to a Christmas tree farm and cut down Christmas trees. Mm-hmm. And it was like one of my favorite Christmases ever.
I'm Jewish, so tell me more about this.
So imagine you got your own candle wax. Never mind. But so it was going well. But she went out of town. And I'd always had a friend here and there. But I told myself I'm not really gay. Well, I had a lot of excuses. One of them was my career, because for a long time I'm a radio personality. And I was concerned that I wouldn't get the job if they knew the truth, mm-hmm. which I still believe to this day. When I was hired at a radio station in Washington, D.C., Mix 107.3, I would never have been hired if they'd have known at the time I was gay. And so I'm still working at the same radio station. My girlfriend's working with me. She's out of town, actually out of the country. And I'm having a party at my house. It was like for Super Bowl or WrestleMania or something like that. And a guy that we worked with, who's gay, I said, what are you doing this weekend? And he said, well, nothing. I said, well, you should come over to my house for this party. And he goes, well, I live far away. And I'm like, well, I have a guest room. You could stay at my house, no problem, on a Sunday. So he did. And he stayed over. And he stayed over, if you know what I mean.
Oh, we're picking up what you're putting down.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, I thought because anytime I'd done anything like that before, I'd been with somebody who was in the closet. And it's like Fight Club. There is no Fight Club. Nothing happened. I don't know what you're talking about. And that's what it was like for me. Mm-hmm. And I knew I had a problem when we went to a restaurant together. And I had my hands on the table. And he reached across and tried to hold my hand. Mm-hmm. And I put my hand up like this, like I was being mugged. And he said, wait a minute, we can do stuff at your house, but we can't hold hands in a restaurant? And I'm like, yes, exactly. That's what we cannot do. We cannot do anything in public. But that was because of where I was in my life. Well, one day, this is after my girlfriend got back in town, I called and she didn't answer the phone. And I called and she didn't answer. So I went over there. And when I got there were coworkers there with her. And the look that she gave me, I kind of knew what it was. And the next day, she said, we'll talk the next day. So it's on a Friday. And she said, tell me about Steven. And I said, well, he's a funny guy. And I knew what she meant. And she said, Jimmy, why can he describe your body? And I didn't know what to say. So I got angry and said it was bullshit. And why are people saying this? And I did what any real man would do in that circumstance. I lied. And the next day, she called and she said, come over. And we met on the street. And she said, Jimmy, you can lie to me, but you need to stop lying to yourself. And at that moment, I collapsed to my knees in front of her, and I wept. And I kept saying, I'm sorry, I'm so fucked up. I am so sorry. I am so sorry. And I was paranoid that everybody was going to know, because again, I have a very public job, and in my mind, it was going to come crashing down. And I had to tell people. I had to get it out there. So first person I called was my aunt, who I'm very close with. And I called her and I started crying, and she's like, what's wrong? I'm like, there's something I have to tell you. And she's like, did you lose your job? I'm like, no, I'm gay. And she said, Jimmy, do you not think this is something your sisters and I have talked about in the past? And that did not make me feel better at the time. And then the second person I called was Chili Amar. Mm-hmm. In fact, not only did I tell her, I drove over to her house. And I needed to be around people who I knew cared about me. And another woman, Carol, who we worked with, I called her.
Not to interrupt you, but did you feel a sense of relief each
time?
No,
it was horrible. It was horrible. Stephanie, it was awful. Everything about it was awful. All I wanted to do was get in my car and drive far away and never come back. I wanted to go to the Grand Canyon or go somewhere where no one knew me and never come back. I was so humiliated. And it was awful. I mean, to this day, I still remember the look on her face. To this day, it haunts me.
Your girlfriend's face.
Yeah, my girlfriend's face. Anytime, and for the years, anytime someone would say, oh, Jimmy, you're so nice, or you've done this, I would think, I'm not a good person. I hurt her. The last time I remember leaving her house, she said, why did you work so hard? Why did you work so hard to win me over? And I remember shutting that door, leaving, and hearing her crying. It's like, I just wanted to drive. I wanted to die. I mean, I literally, at the time, not that I was going to commit suicide, but I just wanted it to be all over. I wanted it to be gone. I never wanted to face her again. The person who meant so much to me, that would hurt her in that way. And she was tough. And to see her like that, it was awful. It was, other than people dying in my life, that was the worst moment of my life. Because I hurt and betrayed somebody who meant the world to me. It was awful. And to this day, if I see her, I feel deep foreboding. I feel like when I see her, I feel gloom. And not to her, but it's to me, because I know her. And she is married now, happy, but it has everything to do with me and how I came up short as a human being.
Well, however, it was kind of a turning point for you, right? So
I look at it this way. It was the worst moment in my life, but it has led me the happiest time in my life. Now I'm married. I have a husband. I have a dog. I mean, it took a long time. And I came out, or was outed, in 2007.
Yes.
12 years later. Still, in fact, at your wedding, I think it was at your wedding, and you got married when?
I got married about 6 months ago.
So 6 months ago, I saw her, my ex-girlfriend, and she hugged me. And it meant the world to me. I mean, because I was, and I probably have said this to many co-friends, mutual friends, does she hate me? She hates me. She hates me. And the thing is, I think if you asked her and said, who is somebody in your life that no matter what, if you called him in the middle of the night, even where she lives now, would he help you? She knows that I would be in a car, in a train, in a plane, down to Texas to do whatever I could for her. And I should say, after that, I think she knew I was in a bad place. And she was very kind to me. And I'll never forget that.
Well, talk a little bit more about that sort of aftermath, because it was out.
And I'd worked at this place for 10 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, and that you were at a place where you had, well, actually, I want to ask you a question. Since you were outed, what are your feelings towards the person that outed you?
A lot of people show anger towards him when I tell the story, but I'll say his name's Stephen. He's the reason I live the life I do now, and for that I am eternally grateful. Was it cool at the time? No, I didn't look at it that way. But he gave me a sense of freedom that I never would have had the guts to have myself. So, and I should say, Stephen has gone on to work for a business that does interventions for people with drug and alcohol issues. And he has helped countless people on their path to sobriety. And he is doing what I believe is God's work and has helped tons of people. So I look at him as a positive influence in my life, even though at the time it was awful.
Well, and I've heard this story many times, but it's one of my favorite stories, is how you go about, you mentioned that you went and talked to Chili, and you went to talk to Carol, and you started...
The people in my life.
People in your life, and there's one person in particular that you had a conversation with who has had a tremendous influence on your life, and especially your career path. And I just really love this story, so I'm going to just turn it over to you to tell this story.
Well, what happened was I worked on a radio show called The Jack Diamond Show from 1997 till recently. And I had to tell him that I was outed and that I'm gay. My life is crashing down on me, and I know this may not sound dramatic to many of you who've gone through far worse than I have, but at the time of my life, it was awful. And so I called this man I worked with, who is a mentor, like a father figure to me, Jack Diamond, and he is someone I love dearly. And I know he loves me. So we're very close, but I needed to tell him this. So we meet at a restaurant, and I assume he thinks I'm probably telling him I'm leaving the show. Because it was like, I need to tell you this. This is very important. And I didn't tell him what it was. So we get to the restaurant, and we're sitting there, and I said, you know how like some men like wine? And he's like, yes. And I said, you know, some men like beer. He goes, yeah. And I said, you know, some men like pina coladas. And he goes, yes. And I said, well, Stephen was my pina colada. And he looked at me and goes, well, James, he is a very pretty man. And I'm like,
yes.
yeah, he is. And I looked at him with tears in my eyes, and I'm like, I just don't know what to do. I'm so humiliated. How do I walk in that building that I've worked for 10 years and face everybody? And he looked at me and he says, James, everybody there loves you. And if they don't now, fuck them. And that was the first moment of my new life that I felt free. And I felt like just a ton of weights, and you'll hear people say this, tons of weight, or they're carrying this heavy load that now has been lifted off them. And that's what Jack Diamond did for me, and I'll never forget that.
Well, let's back it up a little bit then, because obviously this was not a first incident. It was not.
No.
It was not your, oh my God, aha moment. If I were Oprah.
Yeah. No.
I'm not Oprah. But so let's back it up. When did you first think that you might be gay?
I knew early on that there was something going on. Maybe when we share this podcast, I'll share a video on YouTube. There was a pro wrestler named the Exotic Adrian Street, and he was this British wrestler. And
it would be a wrestler.
It would be, and his gimmick was he was very flamboyant, almost like an Elton John. He was British, and I remember liking that character so much because I knew, and I wasn't It wasn't like I was attracted to him. It was just like I knew I liked that character, and I knew something that was different. And then I was watching the TV show Dallas, which I loved. And there was a character who was playing a child therapist for J.R. and Sue Ellen's son. And it was Christopher Atkins. And every week he would be in a Speedo. And I'm like, I don't know what this is about, but I certainly like it. And that's when I knew, I like that too. But you kept it. I grew up in North Carolina, and you wanted to keep that stuff on the down low, and I did. But there were times, in high school that I had a friend. His name was Chip, and he did not care who knew he was gay, and he was unbelievably beautiful, unbelievably talented, a great guy, and he was the first person I ever kissed. Let me rephrase that. First guy I ever kissed. And I remember seeing him not too long ago, and he was saying how many people have reached out to him and said that they were gay and that they were apologizing for how they may have treated him. And he said, those cowards, now they come to me. And I thought, Stephanie, oh my God, I'm one of those cowards. Because he said to me one time, are you not brave enough to tell people who you are? I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm not brave at all. Of course, I grew up with a Phantom of the Opera poster over my bed. I don't know how people, especially my mom, didn't know. But yeah, I look at Chip McClure as somebody who, he was definitely somebody I looked up to, still do.
Well, we've talked a little bit about, your high school friend, and we of course went into what I can describe is when you and I worked together during that time, the early aughts, if you will, mid-aughts. We not only had a very positive working environment as co-workers, but we had a very unusual kind of group, and we were more like a family. We still are. And I tell people that because I don't think people necessarily experience that in the workplace. However, you do have a real family. So tell me a little bit about, you mentioned you called your aunt, but kind of the evolution of that, because you also have a very unique family structure.
Yes, I have 3 brothers, 2 sisters. And most of my siblings, well, they're all older than I am, and my nephews and niece, they're closer to my age than my siblings. And it was hard for me to tell. I told my aunt, and then I told my niece Allison, who I'm very close with. And then it just would happen like this. 2 people in particular who meant a lot to me. I'm in the beach, and when you're in the ocean, you're caught, you're stuck. You're in this conversation.
Yep.
And my nephew Brian, who's 6 years younger than I, he said that, he goes, Jim, we all know you're gay, but I love you, man. I just want you to be happy. And of course, you're in the ocean rocking back and forth. You can't move. And I just said, thank you. It meant the world to me. And then my cousin, Jeff, who there isn't a gay joke he doesn't like. He wouldn't think of him as being the most progressive guy in the world. But we were at Capital One Arena watching a WWE event, I promise you, and it's a cage match. And
naturally.
It's around Christmas, because what better way to celebrate the birth of our Lord and Savior than a cage match? And we're looking straight at the ring, and he goes, hey, why didn't you tell me? And I'm like, I knew what he meant. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. He goes, yeah, you do. He goes, you're like a brother to me. I want you to be happy. I don't care. And that meant the world to me.
Yes.
My mom, interestingly, she's from Connecticut, and one of her best friends was this man in North Carolina who was from Staten Island, New York, who was a banker, and he was an older man, and he was gay. We all knew he was gay. He said he was gay, so it wasn't like he was in the closet. He was gay, and it was her best friend. We were with him all the time, and I knew without a shadow of a doubt my mom would not have cared. She wouldn't have cared. But for whatever reason, it was really tough to admit it to her. I don't know why. And I would think about ways to bring it up. So, so Mom, I was going down in the sky the other day. No, but I never could tell her. And I talked to it with all my siblings, just not with her. So when I was working in Atlanta on a radio station there, we had an issue, and the issue was this. I told them that I was gay, and they're like, well, we know that. And I'm like, well, the audience won't know. And they're like, of course they'll know. And I'm like, they won't know unless I tell them. And this same thing happened over the weekend. So they had this perceptual, where, the two-way mirrors, where the audience is listening to different things from the show, and they tell you what you think of the personalities, the audience who's there. And they said, what do you think about Jimmy? And somebody said, oh, he's funny. And another said, oh, he makes me laugh. And the other one said, well, you can tell he's a poon hound.
Do people even still use that phrase?
They did in Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh, boy.
So on the other side of the glass is all the management who I had said, they won't know unless I tell them. And they're like, did they just call Jimmy a poon hound? And I'm like, yeah, that's it. Well, that same night, I had gone out with this guy. And the guy he was a model, and he was from D.C., and he was then living in Atlanta, and he reached out to me, and I'd never met him, and we went out and hung out, and I thought, I'm on a date with the hottest guy I've ever met in my life. And we're sitting outside, and all of a sudden, a motorcycle shows up, and it's a woman on the back of a motorcycle, and she looked like Angelina Jolie. I mean, she was beautiful. And she joins us, and I realize, oh, I'm not on a date. I'm meeting this guy and his girlfriend for dinner. And I'm like, I need to be more clear that I'm into guys. So the next day, I think I did this here on Jack's show, where I would play Diana Ross's I'm Coming Out, to make it clear, I'm coming out, I'm gay. da-da-da, because it just was so difficult for people to grasp that, oh, he doesn't date women anymore. So during that time, I thought, maybe the next day after I announce it, I'm coming out, I'll tell my mom. And so I called my mom on the air and told her. And it was hard then. But how sad is that in my life that it was easier for me to go on the air and tell my mom this news than calling her on the phone or seeing her in person. So I said, Mom, I'm gay. And she goes, Jim, I don't care. You're not in rehab. You're not in jail. You're just on the radio. It's fine. I don't care. So for Mom, thank you.
Your mother was a character. I had the pleasure of meeting her.
That she was.
Yes.
But she didn't care. During that time, though, when she came to visit me, I was dating somebody. And he was a little younger than me.
A little?
He was a little younger than I was. And I told her how old she was, and she goes, Jesus Christ, Jim. But then she met him, and she really liked him, and he was great. Now, he was, I guess there was two. A guy I dated here named Gabe, who was great, my first boyfriend. And then...
I do remember Gabe.
Gabe was great. And then Nolan, who was wonderful. He's a great guy.
Well, it sounds to me, aside from the initial outing, you've had people react generally very positively to this news, despite your kind of crippling fear for the opposite. Was there anybody whose reaction you weren't into?
I had a friend who is very religious, and I don't mean that as a negative, that gave me tapes on how to pray the gay away. And I realized recently that she defriended me on Facebook and Instagram and all that stuff. I was like, okay. But no, it's been really positive for me because I was really in fear that listeners would be turned off and not feel comfortable listening to the show anymore because of it. But what I had was the complete opposite. People reached out and said thank you because you can say, well, 10% of the country is gay, or 11%. But what you have to realize is that 10 or 11% have mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers and cousins, and it means a lot to them. And that's what I've heard from are people who have only been positive about it, because it may be their child or, some relative of them who are gay too, and I think they appreciate.
Well, given your story, if you could go back and do it all over again, are you the type of person that has regrets or?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, another regret is this because, I believe in that Kinsey scale. Some people don't, I do. Where you're, on the Kinsey scale. And my joke is you have from John Wayne to Nathan Lane. I mean, that's a big difference in the spectrum. And I have talked to, and this was painful recently, I ran into one of my ex-girlfriends. And it's an ex-girlfriend who I've not seen since I started dating guys. And then I felt like I needed to tell her, hey, just because I'm dating guys now doesn't mean that what we had was fake to me or wasn't real. It was. And in fact, I sent a message to somebody on Instagram because that's where you really want to delve into deep feelings is Instagram.
You slide into their DMs.
I did. Yeah. I did. And it was so weirdly worded by me. And I think she appreciated what I was saying because I would not have ever I would never allow myself to get in relationships with somebody that I didn't really genuinely care for or was attracted to. And it's hard because I haven't seen them to, and I don't know if they even, A, want to be told that or B, care, but to me it was something. Because there was a girl in high school who stayed a friend my whole life, and, she described us once as soulmates, and I always tell my husband now that one day this girl may show up, and if she does, then we're going to have to make room in our house for Sarah. But those were not made up moments in my life or just to fit in. They were real, genuine love. And a lot of times that gets kind of poo-pooed by people who don't believe in someone actually being bi.
Is that how you identify yourself?
I always say a gay guy because I think I do this to make straight people laugh. I will make fun of myself, and it will make them feel comfortable. I'm like, well, I'm the gay guy. What do I know? Because it sounds better it's funnier than, hey, I'm the bi guy. But I would say I'm bi, but I would never, but I live as a gay guy because now I'm married. So I don't know if my husband would really appreciate me bringing women home. I don't think.
Well, you are recently married.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I will.
Cheers.
We'll cheers to that. So, did you ever in a million years thought you would be married? I mean, I know you've been engaged before, and could talk a little bit about that, but that you would really be living this very conventional life as a married man. You have a dog. I mean, come on.
We are one white picket fence away from the American dream. No, I never thought, because my joke would always be, why ruin a great friendship when you get married? No, I am so happy and so lucky. I met this guy, he's a nurse, and he's just been the most wonderful influence in my life. But growing up in North Carolina, I never thought I'd get married. Jeez, people go, I host these pride proms now, and it means so much to me to see these kids just being who they want to be, being who they are, and not afraid of being bullied or being made fun of. And I would never have thought about bringing a guy to prom with me. I mean, I would have been scared what everybody would have said, or being beaten up, or, well, I wanted to go with Sarah, so I would never have gone with a guy. But I never in my life thought it would be an opportunity for me to be married. And I should tell you about when I first came to DC. There was a time I went to this gay club, and it was middle of the night. It was like a late club. Mm-hmm. And I go to the door, and the bouncer says, "Hey, aren't you Jimmy Alexander from the Jack Diamond Show?" And I'm like, "No, man, that ain't me." And I turned around and left. And I was scared. I was scared to death. I was scared to death that there'd be other radio shows that would out me. I mean, that was another fear after the thing when I was outed. I was scared that they were going to talk about another radio show and just be humiliated before I could talk to my family about it. I was in constant fear that people would find out.
Well, knowing what you know now and given your life now, I'm sure there are many people listening to this who are struggling in the same way that you are. You were living in this fear. What would you say to those people?
I understand when you feel hopeless. I understand that you feel like every person in your life is going to desert you or judge you. But the clarity that comes with being your true self, the happiness that comes from not worrying about being found out constantly, that's awful. That was the worst part, is always being in fear of people finding out, people knowing. It's better. The grass is greener on this side. I would always say, Stephanie, that I'm gay, but I'm not going to go you're not going to see me at any, parades. And then I went to the first Pride Parade. And you get choked up when you see the PFLAG families and just how happy everybody is. You can't put a price tag on happiness. And life's too short not to be happy. I guess my advice to them would be, find that one friend, find that one relative that you can trust, and tell them. And you will feel so much better. You don't have to do it all at once. And that's another thing I tell people, when they're upset with their parents because their parents aren't understanding, I'm like, well, think of how long you struggled with coming out. Months, years. Well, you expect your parents to understand immediately. Sometimes it takes them a while too. So be understanding with that.
That's great advice. Now, one thing, this has been a very educational process for me, and getting to know people through you and some of the terminology or some of, just things that people say to gay people. And one segment you wanted to do for this show or this podcast is kind of basically like dumb stuff that straight people say. And I just thought this was great. And I thought it was actually very enlightening for me, because sometimes you say things, you're trying to make somebody feel better.
Yes.
And instead you sound ridiculous.
Silly, straight people comments. Yes. If you have a friend who's gay and they come out to you, please don't say, I knew you were gay. Don't say that. Gay people hate that. Another one is, I have the perfect person for you. Just because somebody may also be a gay or lesbian or trans doesn't mean that we're all going to like each other or be attracted to each other.
You all know each other.
Yeah, we all. Yeah. Another one is shopping. That they all think you're going to go shop. We're going to be shopping buddies. Like NTG, baby, not that gay.
That's actually my mom's favorite Jimmyism is the NTG.
Yeah,
yes.
Not that gay.
Yes.
And I don't mean that as a negative. If you are that gay, that's good for you.
But I think the point is that just like everybody is unique. Everybody has their own likes and dislikes.
Yes, it would be like just saying every Jewish person likes matzo ball soup.
Well, that's actually usually the case. But yes, I see where you're going with that.
Okay. Or yes. Kugel, how's that?
Sure. Yeah, that could be a little bit more polarizing.
Okay.
Gefilte fish is definitely polarizing. Given that this is our first episode, why are you doing this? Why do you want to do this?
I tell you, a friend of mine told me this story, and it broke my heart. A guy, college-age guy, tells his parents that he was gay. And I can't imagine how hard that is. I couldn't even do it to their face. I did that with my mom through the radio. But he goes and tells his parents that he's gay. And they look at him and tell him, well, tomorrow you're going to have to leave the house, and we're not going to pay for your college. The next day, he goes back to them, and he goes, I think it's just a phase. I'm not really gay. And that was the most depressing story to me, because it wasn't in some remote little town. It was in Pennsylvania. And I thought, oh my God, the freedom that I felt when I came out was so wonderful. To finally feel the sunshine hit your face. It's the greatest feeling in the world. And that this poor kid now is having to pretend to be straight so his parents don't kick him out of the house and not pay for college. And that made me think, we need to do something about that. Because I'm sure there are parents who may be listening right now. And that was my goal, is to have this as a way to hear different stories. It won't all be gay guys. It will be lesbians and trans and bi and maybe, and asexual people, just so they have a voice and that you're not alone. And that's the thing, I think, Stephanie, is because when so many people are in the closet, you don't know anybody gay. And then you feel like you're all alone. And you're not alone. There's tons of us. Tons. Just go to a estate sale or antiquing. You'll find us. We're right there, if that makes sense.
Well, any last words?
I'm a big believer in you don't get rid of people in your life. And I know there may be a lot of parents out there, or a lot of you who've had to get rid of your parents because they don't accept you for who you are. We got to do something about that. Because you never know when the last time you'll be able to tell someone you love them.